Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, The Summoner, written by J. Thompson. It is independently published, copyright 2019, but this copy was printed 7th of February 2021. The illustrations are by a Jenny Joachim, spelled Yoakem. And I don't know how much this book originally cost, but the copy I have through Coas Books is $4.50. This book is kind of short, and the video is going to be short as well. And that's because the book is only about 250 pages long, maybe 245 when you remove all the blank pages. But basically what intrigued me about this book is that the main character, or rather the perspective, what interested me about this book is that the perspective character isn't the titular character. So like in the book The Vagrant, which is a very similar premise, the vagrant from the title is the perspective character. But he doesn't talk, and so the people that do talk are his representatives, his friends, the people around him. In The Summoner, he does actually talk, the main character, and his name is Dalin, Fainheart, Phoenix-born, the Undying, and he is an immortal warrior. Every time he dies in battle, he comes back, and so what he is doing in the story is escorting. A escort mission is usually the boring one in a video game, but it can be fun to read about in a book. And in this case, he is escorting a young girl, a person from a bloodline of summoners, and the last summoner, and she is being escorted to a safe haven where she can learn to properly control her power. That doesn't start until about 40-50 pages into the book. The bulk of the story is that Dalin is kind of reluctantly immortal. He considers it a curse, whereas everyone else around him considers it a blessing. And he considers it a curse because, kind of similar to the elves in Orconomics, as he gets older, he's basically forgetting more and more memories, that he's recycling memories and building on top of them. So he's still the same person, but he's forgetting a lot about his history. He wants to settle down, he wants to be mortal, and he isn't. He's blessed by a goddess, but perceives it to be a curse. And in the opening chapter, he's running from a battle and is surrounded by the minions of this person who is trying to capture him alive. And so he ends up getting knocked out, killed, and when he comes to, he's imprisoned in a magical castle that kind of rewrites itself around him so that he can never get out unless the owner of the castle wills it. And when he wakes up, he's not told why he's there. He eventually does learn he's been tasked with this mission, escort this girl from point A to point B, but there are going to be people chasing her because her bloodline is important. She is going to be attacked. And so he has to do all these sorts of tricks along the way. So he ends up diverting away from the path at one point and finding a friend from a town that recognizes him, that is willing to help him out. And the evasion in the story is interesting. And the characters are two. The Young girl has a pretty good amount of character development in the story, as well as Dalin, the main character. So it's not just focusing on Dalin, it does include a lot of development with the girl as well. The young girl is named Marlana, and she isn't too aware of the role of callers or summoners, but she does know some of their history, and she says this on 154. Someone asks her, "I can't imagine a bird would have much to say, would it?" At his words, Hello puffed himself up and gave a quick cry of indignation. Akal laughed in surprise. He really does understand, doesn't he? Marlana nodded. But only when I am with him. I am still learning to control my ability. When people talk, I tend to send their words out as thoughts to all the creatures around me. It's something I need to get better about. I read in one of my father's books that there used to be more like me, callers or summoners, that they could not only communicate with the animals, but they could also control them. Marlana explained. Control them how? Akal asked as he pulled a string of bones from the fish. Make them do what you want, anything you want. I've only done it once so far, when Dalin and I were running from some men and needed help, so I called them. What happened? They came. There were birds, deer, and a moose. I think I even felt a bear. I forced them all to come to my aid and run alongside us. It felt wrong to force them, but Dalin said we would have died otherwise. Marlana didn't mention that she had felt several of the animals fall to arrows as they ran. They had given their lives for Marlana and Dalin. She felt guilty about that. In a very similar way to familiars in a lot of fantasy stories, she can see through the eyes and feel the senses of the creatures that she controls and summons. And it's basically her point A to point B story. But she does have some degree of agency and control of the narrative, and it's not just Dalin directing her. It is a bit of back and forth. Overall, it is a short book. It's a pretty quick read. It didn't take me long, and it didn't really have any hiccups or stumbling points on the way. So if you pick it up, you're almost certainly going to finish it. But because it doesn't really have much of that complexity to it, it's not really interesting. I remember a lot because I have a good memory for these things, but it doesn't stick with you. It doesn't have interesting things to say about humanity or about the world or this setting or magic or really anything. It does have a bit to say about immortality and finding one's place within the blessings that they have, but that's not necessarily well communicated. It just kind of happens near the end. So I think it's a good book, maybe 3 or 3.5 stars if you were doing a 1 through 5 kind of rating. I think it's good as a young adult novel, which is probably what it actually is, but as far as any depth or complexity, I don't really think it has much. So I'm not going to reread it. I will probably put it back into the used book system. But yeah, it's an okay book if you're looking for something to read and don't want to think too hard about it. This would be a good book for you. Anyway, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.